Welcome, everyone. It is Tuesday, October 26th, and welcome to the Sliven General Meeting. Tonight, we do have a wonderful guest with us, Nancy Macy of the Environmental Committee of the Valley Women's Club. And we will start this evening's meeting with some brief reports. Liz, do you have any report that you'd like to give regarding CERT?
Yes, our local CERT team in Felton, the Felton area, will be assisting trick-or-treaters on Halloween around downtown Felton. As we have done before, many of the people here have participated in that. If you're not signed up already, and you're available, it would be great. It'll pretty much be as we have done before with using MERS radios and having people with traffic experience distributed out to the crosswalks to assist parents and trick-or-treaters in getting across the street safely. There are about 4 locations in Felton downtown that need some coverage. We are also inviting our friends from Aries to participate with MERS radios, pardon me, to provide crowd monitoring again, as we have done in the past. This was at the request of Chief Gray. We will also be having on the 6th of November, which is a normal call out for Felton area CERT. We will be doing a cooperative event with the North County CERTs, and John Collins will be leading a 3-hour training on electrical safety and responding to downlines and the things of that sort. And there is a Sign Up Genius application for this as well. Those of you who are already associated with Felton area CERT and Scotts Valley CERT have already received this. If you have any questions, you want to sign up. If you're from out of area at all, just contact me at the website on my up here on my screen, and I'll get you the information out. For those of you who are participating in the Halloween event on Sunday evening, we are asking, if possible, for you to join us for a brief pre-event training that will happen on Thursday, this 2 nights hence, on Zoom, so we have an opportunity to ask questions and go over some details and some things like that. Lastly, we're very happy that CERT was not called out. We were on standby. Many people contacted me and said they would make themselves available in certain time chunks, and that was helpful to know. But as you know, we dodged the bullet. So they did set up a station at the SLE San Lorenzo Valley Elementary School and at the high school, but to my knowledge, they were not used to any great degree. Although there were some people that parked in the parking lot at the elementary school on, I think, Friday night or Saturday night. So anyway, that's any questions? Otherwise, I'll cut it. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Dan, do you have a brief report on Aries?
Yes, well, Aries was also activated for the storm event, potentially to assist with equine evac. we had a little typical miscommunication where equine evac was activated before Aries, and so of course we pretty much everybody, all the animals were evacuated before Aries was even activated. But we were ready to be used as needed. So.
And earlier this month, or around the 15th, there was the control burn fire down in Corralitos, and I understood that there was a possible Aries call out for that. What happened in that situation?
It was similar story. There was, because there's a shelter opening up, there was a possibility of having people staff that and whatever other possible communication needs might be needed. I had signed up to head off to do that during the evening hours, but fortunately we weren't actually called out for that either.
Good to know. Always seems like they're keeping everyone in Aries on their toes this season.
Yeah, they had activated the EOC and did have people there in the ready room at the EOC should they be needed.
Thank you. All right, so I've also asked Jo Marie to speak to everyone about flu shots this evening.
Okay, flu season, it's here. I'll have a short brief. No, I'm teasing. Flu season starts generally in September and runs through the end of spring, so May timeframe. And you want, when you get your flu shots, you always kind of need to think about the timing of it, especially those of us on the older side. I'm in that group now, sadly. You don't want to get the vaccine too early, but you don't want to wait too late either, and you have to think about holiday seasons and your exposure to other people and who you're going to be around, holidays, big gatherings, lots of exposures. So, and you need to build up your immunity after your vaccine. So timing is really important. Also, of the older group, if we get our vaccine too early, we won't last through the entire flu season. And so it will drop off quicker. And so then you're at risk at the end of the spring area. And that's another time when it tends to surge. So the optimal time, they say, for the older group is September and October to get that. So and then it takes about 2 weeks before your immunity is at a good protective level. Also, flu vaccines are adapted every year based on historical flus of recent years. So they keep modifying and they try to predict what type of virus is going to be predominant. And so it's a guessing game, and it's the roll of the dice, and sometimes they get it really good and other times not so well. So, and there's new variants that come out, just like what we've seen with COVID, same thing with the flu. And if anybody can recall, what was our most recent large variant that came out from the flu? Anybody remember? It was about 5-6 years ago. All of you probably got a vaccine for it. The H1N1 variant that came out, and there was dramatic hospitalizations, and sound familiar, similar to the COVID stuff. So they try to do their best guess. Last year was a really light year in regards to the number of cases of the flu. Why might that be?
Masks.
Everybody was masking, hand washing, distancing, all of that stuff. So, we helped ourselves because of that. But now that we are a little bit more free than last year this time, we do need to think about those things. So not only for COVID, but we also need to think about that. So if you're worried about the crowd you're in and stuff, you might want to wear the mask, and that's okay, Allie?
Yeah, I have a question. If you have the flu, do you need to wait until it's entirely over to get the shot?
You need to be without symptoms, and the symptoms are really hard to identify sometimes. But definitely no fever, no coughing, no sneezing, and no GI issues. So you really have to listen to your body, and if you have any of those things, stay away from others. Yeah, Caroline?
I wondered if you could address the timing between booster shots for COVID and flu shots.
Okay, I did. I had that on my list, so thanks for the prompt. The CDC has said that you can get the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine at the same time. No harm, no foul. And I'm a little guarded with that personally. Just knowing how I felt with flu shots, I usually get a little achy, not grossly, but a little achy. But the COVID kind of put me down for a day, and some of us had different reactions. So, but I did research that, and it clearly says on the websites can be given together. So the availability, where can you get a flu shot? Pharmacies, your doctor's office, specialized flu events, and a lot of our insurances pay for it. So several of us, it's free, but there is nominal cost for others too. So, but most insurances pick up the tab because it's preventative. There is also, just to be aware, if you're over 65, you should be asking for what's called the high dose flu vaccine. And if you don't ask, they will probably give you general population. So you may have to ask for the high dose, and that they may say you have to go to your doctor's office for that. Various pharmacies have it, but it's not always in supply. So when I went and got my shot about a month ago, I asked if they had it in stock, and they did not. And that was at CVS in Scotts Valley. But that could have been just that day. They're getting shipments and stuff. I've not heard of a shortage, but it's, dynamic. So how the prevalence of flu is identified is generally if you contact your doctor's office, you go into the doctor's office, or you go into the emergency room. There's not as much swabbing to identify it. It's less identifiable. And often the State Department, Health Department goes by symptomology. So if you call up your doctor and saying, I have the sniffles and I have this, this symptomology, that gets recorded and that gets submitted when the bills are dropped and, processing, and the State Department has access to that information and they cull it from that. It's a loose association and it may not be the flu, but that's how they identify it. And not everybody calls their doctors. They tough it out for 3 days and then they're fine and off and running. So the incidence of flu is really hard to identify. COVID, they were very, easily able to identify it because people were getting swabs, they were getting sick, and they were probably some people who had the minor side of things slipped through the cracks. But flu is a lot harder to find the prevalence of how often it occurs. Can you get the flu from a flu vaccine? There is a terrible myth out there, and it's been, for all my years of nursing, it's been the number one consistent myth that's it's traveled in being communicated. You can't get the flu from the flu vaccine, especially the adult variety of the flu vaccine. That's a dead virus. There's no way. Generally, it's a timing issue. They've already been exposed, and then they finally go and go to get the flu vaccine. They get the flu vaccine, and then they start demonstrating symptoms. It's just usually timing, and they've already been exposed, because it's a 4 to 5 day, time frame before you start showing symptomology and stuff. The treatment, if you do start feeling fluish and you're in communication with your provider, they can take a nasal swab, and it actually is recommended now to do a nasal swab for both COVID and the flu at the same time, because they need to roll out both. The symptomology is very similar, and sometimes it's the swab that defines that, because it's 2 different viruses. And so you want to get a swab, and then your provider may offer some drug treatment, but it's really early on in the symptoms. If you've been a week or 3 days, you're too late. And all the treatment does is shorten the length of the flu issues. So especially if you got like a lot of GI stuff going on, this may help shorten that and not get so dehydrated and other sequelae from those type of symptomology. But there is no antibiotic that's going to treat it, because why? Antibiotics are for bacteria, and this is a virus. And so, going in and asking your doctor for antibiotics is not going to work. But there's one really common medication called Tamiflu. So if you want to talk to your provider, you might ask, do you recommend taking Tamiflu? And I believe it's 3 to 4 days course of medications. And all it does, it's not curative. It's just symptom treatment. There are lots of websites with flu information, but the 3 main ones you want to consider is our local health department. They have great information. And then our state department, health department, and then CDC. We've all visited the CDC quite frequently in the last year. They have a whole section on the flu. So it's great information, and there's lots of trending information. And right now, being in, late October, our flu incidence has been really low as of late. So I'm going to stop right there unless anybody has other questions or comments.
And I just put links in the chat.
Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent presentation. Thank you, Jo Marie.
I was going to share websites, but in the sense of time, I decided not to. And everybody's gotten their flu vaccine? Yay! I get personal, sorry.
Yeah, mine's a timing issue. Glenn caught it very early on in September and gave it to me. And then I had symptoms and ear infection and stuff following that. I was waiting for the symptoms to go away. just about ready to get my shot, and Glenn has come down with the flu again.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I'm watching for symptoms, and I'm going, come on.
Yeah.
I'm in good faith. I do want to get the shot, but I don't want to
Yeah.
I'm sick.
Yeah. So well, I hope you get it soon, Allie, you know. So
I have to wait to see if I get the symptoms too.
exactly. Yeah, and that's prudent, you know, because you don't want to be your body trying to rev up and be fighting it too. I mean, you can handle it, but still. So, and has everybody heard about the high dose vaccine for ages over 65? Okay, good. That's finally getting out there. It seemed like it was hard to get that information out there.
I
There
had
have
no trouble getting one in CVS in Felton.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think it was just a timing issue for me, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were able to get them at Walgreens too in Scotts Valley.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and they're doing ads on TV now for one of the varieties. I don't know how many there are, but they are definitely pushing it on TV. So
Yeah. It was interesting. When I was prowling the CDC website, there's two new variants out there. And these are viruses that usually are in pigs. Even the H1N1, that's where it was also common. You know, it was a pig virus. And both of the events were in children. And I was like going, okay, pay attention. You know, one's a variety of H1N1. And just like what we know about COVID, viruses can adapt to the environment and become a new strain and they're always trying to fight the fight and get stronger. So, and that's their motive, you know, to live. And that's how come new variants come out and new strains. So,
well,
So are the flu vaccines and I'm going to say this wrong, but like the COVID, like the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, the rDNA or whatever it's called?
yes. What they it's actually virus. The viruses that they decide that are what might be prevalent in the community, in the world. And then they kill them some way, but they keep the virus structure. So when we get and it's dead, but when we get it introduced to our bodies, our body recognizes it's still being foreign and develops this immunity process to be able to respond. And that's how come when we're exposed to it again, our bodies can fight it off or have less of an issue.
And I'd just like to make a point here that this is a standard way of handling vaccines.
Yeah.
Going back to polio and all the shots that are given to kids nowadays, the whole sequence, this use of basically dead organisms to stimulate the body is very common. So it's not a new, past practice.
So, okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jo Marie. All right. We are going to move on to the main feature of this evening's call. We've invited to be with us Nancy Macy of the Environmental Committee of the Valley Women's Club. And the Valley Women's Club, their mission is community action and awareness and leadership in several areas: environmental, educational, social, and political issues that affect the health and the welfare of San Lorenzo Valley. Environmental Committee, we get to hear a bit more about that from Nancy. The mission statement of the Environmental Committee is to protect the watershed and educate the public on forestry issues, erosion control, hazardous waste, recycling, and also to monitor the government policies and procedures around the environment. Did I get that about right, Nancy?
Beautifully done, Tammy. Yes.
Well,
that's
welcome.
that pretty
welcome
much
to
covers it.
Flippin'.
And
Yeah.
it's very helpful to have that as a background because it'll make more sense about when I start talking about one aspect or another.
Sure.
It's really very special to be here, and I appreciate you and Mikhail's emails and communication and support. And I'm so grateful that everybody survived and we didn't have giant issues with the first major rain, and so far so good, knock on wood, huh? I don't know how many of you know about the founding of the Valley Women's Club. I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a history, so it would kind of show you the relevance of its name and what the issues are that we're involved in and all of that. I had to laugh when I looked at the history on the Valley Women's Club's website because I was going to recommend that you read it. Well, it goes all the way up to 2007. And I know the current board is working on updating the website, and I think that will probably have to happen as part of it. Maybe I can help a little bit with that one. It was founded by a group of women, surprise, back in 1978. It was a group of really fun people meeting at Mary Hammer's house. And I was the newest person in the room. I'd only been living in the Valley for 3 years. And I had a little 3-year-old little girl and was pregnant with what turned out to be a little boy. And because I was the newest one, I was chosen president of the Valley Women's Club. It was truly funny. And we were having such a good time, and I had no idea what it was going to lead to. 43, almost 44 years of involvement in this wonderful community, and an incredible number of friends and relationships that have been a part of our lives over the years. Within a few months of the inception of the Valley Women's Club, it had made a name for itself already. We got a newsletter going out right away, and we were involved in a couple of things going on, and we kind of made a splash in the paper with a photograph, and so the idea was that people were understanding that we were sort of an active organization. We didn't we wanted to work to empower people so that they could achieve things that they wanted to achieve in the community. And the membership had expanded, and men were becoming involved in the activities right away and saying, do I get to join? And well, of course, we didn't mean to be exclusive, but the name was important. We decided it was regularly revisited for years. We decided to keep it because it was the inspiration of women that got it going and provided leadership and mentorship to women, especially, but to everyone, to learn how to be active in their community, because so many people just really don't know what to do. And so that was a focus. There's quite a bit of tongue-in-cheek fun with the Women's Club. It's a group of community activists that, people kept expecting us to wear white gloves and have polite small talk and drink tea. And we had work gloves on and were very active and drank herbal tea, but no, all tea, of course. A lot of coffee too. The name has been a lot, we've been razzed with the name over the years. One of my favorite was way back when Supervisor Joe Kuchera was introducing the Valley Women's Club for some event. And he said, the Valley Women's Club is a broad-based organization. The entire room fell apart. It was brilliant. And it's obvious that men are not intimidated by the name. Easily half of our members are men, and men regularly serve on the board. So, you know, it's like, we like men lots, but we decided we better keep the name because it represented a big change which was going on in the 1970s that we were a part of. So within a year, we actually became a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And at the time, that was just filling out a bunch of forms and realizing what the limitations were. We were very careful to read those things because we knew this organization, while it's a 501c3, we were involved in issues that became political. So we had to know what we could do and what we couldn't do. And basically, we can't endorse anybody for offices, for, you know, legislative office, that kind of thing. But we can certainly represent our concerns and viewpoints in a political forum. So as you could see from the mission statement, there's a lot of different interests in the group and a lot of different concerns. One of the first things we wanted to do is provide folks with opportunities to get to know their elected officials. So I would say within 2 years, we were starting to provide, what do you call them? Candidates forums where people could come and listen to the candidates, give a little presentation and then answer questions. And that, and also providing events where their assembly member or state senator or supervisor or our congressional representatives, they've always been invited to the general meeting. They virtually always come and or send a representative to speak for them. But that is one of the special things about the general meeting or the annual meeting, is those people all show up. And that's really heartwarming after all these years. We can't begin to represent all the concerns and viewpoints in the Valley. I mean, that would be, you know, literally impossible. But by mentoring people and getting them involved and showing them how they can be productive and active in their communities, I think it's made a difference. One of the important things that we've done is to help people realize that they have the right and responsibility and many reasons to be involved. Either, you know, look what you guys are doing. Oh my gosh, you're involved in one of the most important issues in our community. And you know, deep down inside, you love it. You come to these meetings, you talk, you share things, and you learn really wonderful skills. One of the aspects of this is our, at the last environmental town hall, Assembly Member Mark Stone stated that he gets more calls from his constituents in one day than virtually every other assembly member he knows get in a month. And he said it's been that way ever since he was supervisor. So you know the Val is vocal and willing to speak up. And when Congresswoman Anna Eshoo was at our last meeting, one of the things she met, it was the Zoom meeting in September. She had planned on coming in person and she was disappointed not to see everybody, but she said, I always listen to the voices in the Valley, and I can assure you she does, and she responds. She does a good job especially when there's a crisis or some issue that where we need her help. Over the years, the Valley Women's Club has realized a really wide variety of accomplishments. One of the first things we did was help define the county's general plan when it was being reconsidered. Was way back in I think it was like 79 and to 80, 81 when it was being rewritten. And one of the things that we worked on was to protect the watershed from unsupportable development, where 350 homes being built in an area that has steep erosive hills and you know, no septic tank, no ability to process septage in your septic tank, that kind of thing. You know, so it sets a set of standards that made it possible to protect the watershed from that kind of unsupportable development. We've done things like campaign to keep the buses running in the valley, because time after time when the cut needed to be made, that was one of the first places they tried to cut. So we would get involved in that. One of the things you will love is that back in 2013, one of our members realized he was studying the base rates of PG&E, which is the based on our weather and our temperature range, they set a base rate. And if that base rate is, for example, set like the coast, where the temperature is modified and modulated by the ocean, so there are no real huge extremes. That's different than like in the foothills of the Sierras, where they have really, really cold weather and really, really hot weather. Well, guess where the valley was in? We were in the coastal zone. And we should not have been. The base rate was established as coastal, and because we were close to the coast, right? So that's what they thought. So we were able to prove with our, data that we put together about the temperatures that the base rate category was wrong. And we found out that it works much better if you have a legislator bring this to the CPUC to get any changes made. And so Supervisor McPherson said, sure, I'll take it to the CPUC, and he did. And by 2016, it took 3 years, but we got the base rate changed. So it may not feel like it, but your PG&E gas rate and electric rate is lower than it would have been otherwise. We've done things to meet the needs of the watershed, because that's such an important part of our what we want to do, what is important. We started the annual River Road cleanup 35 years ago. It was actually started by Al Haynes when he was working for the SLV Water District, and he was going after a grant to do a river cleanup. And so he reached out to the Valley Women's Club and said, would you sign on to the grant and support it? And of course we did. And that ended up that we got to help gather the volunteers and organize how it would work and set up the places where people would bring their stuff. And the water district hauled a bunch of stuff away. The county hauled a bunch of stuff away. And that's been going on for 35 years, the river and road cleanup. We missed 2020, but we did hold it this year. And there's been an average of 5,000 pounds of trash and recyclables removed each year, with anywhere from 75 to 125 volunteers. So it's one of the really exciting and fun things that people of all ages can come and do. School kids can come and get community service, that kind of thing. We now coordinate with Save Our Shores to tie the river's health to the bay and to the ocean. So that is part of what's been going on for the past 9 years now. It was the picture, that was the screen share I wanted to show you, is the picture of 1 year. This is what the people down along the river came across. It wasn't the river, it was a creek. And a downed log, which is a good thing in general. Well, it was also good because it kept all the crop from flowing further downstream. But you should have seen the teenagers going in there after that stuff. They were having such a good time. So that's an example of the type of thing that the River and Road Cleanup is able to take care of. Preventing litter in the watershed also included helping found the first recycling center, the first year of the first summer we were in existence. And then years later, establishing and operated the SLV Redemption Recycling Centers for about 30 years, and 25 of those years, these are estimates, I don't remember the numbers exactly, we were under contract with the county until curbside got to be strong enough and was covering enough of the land, the area, that the county didn't want to continue under that contract, which is, we wouldn't give up the 3 sites without CRV, and that wasn't financially possible without the county's support of the Ben Lomond transfer station. So that stopped, but it was great while it lasted. And it really did keep a lot of trash off the side of the road. Since its inception, the Valley Women's Club has been very active in saving and restoring salmonid species of our Central Coast. We responded to the salmonid restoration plans. I don't know if you realize, but the National Marine Fisheries Service has endangered species plans for the coho salmon and for a bunch of other of the salmonids, including steelhead trout. And they are remarkable plans, and they're kind of invisible. You don't know that they're happening, but because of them, things are improving, which is a good thing. So we've been very active on that. And we worked with, in the past, with about 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, the SOB Water District was thinking about selling the headwaters land. And rather than selling it to someone, they sold it to the state of California, or they actually sold it to Semper Virens, who gave it to the state of California to preserve the land. So they have protected watershed for our water. It's really fun thinking back for this presentation. I remembered how over time, PG&E, the Valley Women's Club, has helped identify needs and then help provide the inspiration and impetus to found another organization. And I realized there are quite a few of them. The VWC helped found the Boulder Creek Friends of the Library. It helped found, let's see, the Valley Resource Center, which is now Mountain Community Resources, which you're very familiar with. Huh, Liz? We helped the volunteer center. It used to be at Highlands Park, and then it moved to Santa Cruz, and now it's famous for the human race and all the things that it does. So we've been involved in the kind of the initiating things of a lot of organizations, and one that I think you will enjoy especially, and I'm going to have to do share screen again and pick a different, first I have to pick the other picture. You're going to wonder why I'm sharing this picture with you. Let's see if you can see these two cute little boys. Are you seeing a picture of two little boys with a bunch of stuff on a table? Oh, no, you're not, because I didn't hit share. Okay.
Yep.
Back after the storm of '82, the Valley Women's Club operated the storm of '82's disaster center in Boulder Creek. That was mostly Mary Hammer and Linda Moore. That they set it up within a couple of days of the storm. And the realization of the importance of the disaster center for solving problems and the need for preparation before a disaster, this is you guys, right? Led to the development of what was first called a neighborhood preparedness plan, but it soon was renamed the Neighborhood Survival Network under the auspices of the Valley Resource Center. And the Neighborhood Survival Network made headlines all over. It was a unique way to involve the community and get neighborhoods ready for disasters. KGO Radio came down from San Francisco and interviewed us about it. And FEMA featured us as a recommended way for communities to prepare for disasters in their national newsletter in 1983. And this letter, this picture, which was sort of a contrived picture, those are my two little boys who are now in their 40s, right? So that's Andrew on the left, and that's Brandy, and they've got rice and all the ingredients you're supposed to have in your disaster preparedness, plan. But I wanted to point out the pictures of the pieces of paper down in the corner. The one on the left is the survey for people to fill out in each neighborhood. And it asks questions like, do you have any special needs? Do you have any special skills? Do you have a chainsaw? all sorts of stuff like that. The next one over with the dark card in the front, the dark card in the front is the ID for the neighborhood coordinator. And the card in back is the card that was filled out, and there were hundreds of those cards. Liz, did you see those cards? There were hundreds of those cards for each, dozens for each of or several for each of the neighborhoods.
I was just gonna say, I still, when I'm going through old paperwork,
Yeah.
run across remnants of this.
Okay.
And it was actually this program and Mary Hammer that drew me into my relationship with Valley Women's Club. And while it sort of was where I got a lot of the inspiration for the things that I have done here, often again in cooperation with you folks.
That's so cool.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, well, the little sheet of paper that's laying flat, that's the list of the neighborhoods and who the contract people are. And the one other point I wanted to make, and I don't want to take too much time on it, but the way we communicated is so different. We had a phone tree. So the person who, like at the resource center, that got the word from the sheriff that such and such was happening, or from the fire department that such and such was happening, that person would call 5 people, and those 5 people would call 5 more. And by about the 3rd line, you had all the neighborhoods contacted. And then from there, each of the coordinators for the neighborhoods would call their neighborhood. And depending upon how big of a neighborhood it was, they would call them all themselves, or they had divided it up further. And one of the things about those calls was it was super effective in getting warnings out. And it was a way for the people who were involved to say something themselves. Oh, I have an idea, blah, blah, blah. And that might have been a really good idea that could have gone back up and changed the way things were being done. It was listening, not just telling. And it went down to each individual resident, and it was very personal. And I think the phone chain is a lost art, but I think it's something that everyone maybe needs to reconsider as at least a way to connect with people, to reassure them of the worth of their work and so on. Especially when we get so many robocalls and thousands of emails that it's hard to read them all. Zoom has made a difference, though. I have to admit, that's very helpful. You don't have to go out in the rain to have a meeting, as long as your power stays on. So that's that picture I wanted to share, and I'm going to, how do I close? Oh, there's stop share up there. Okay, because I want to get ready for the next one when it comes up. The other things I wanted to let you know about was that networking has really been a primary focus of the Valley Women's Club, something you all do as well. And it's especially important in environmental issues such as climate change. It may not be immediately obvious, but global warming, which is what we called it for a long time, global warming has been a major focus of the Valley Women's Club since it was founded. We were worried about global warming back then. And the disaster preparedness was an example of that. We knew that the disasters were only going to get worse and more frequent. So that was an example of preparing for global warming, but it was also a way to remind people that they needed to take steps to help prevent global warming in their lifestyles, in their politics, and so on. So I thought I should point that out. The Valley Women's Club has regularly supported legislation to make changes that would reduce climate change, too often defeated due to fossil fuel industry influence. back when we created the earthquake preparedness calendar. I don't know if any of you ever saw that, but it was a 2-year thing that the Valley Women's Club did with the Valley Resource Center. And it had school kids providing these incredible illustrations for it. And it was a really good informational thing. And the advice was also appropriate for any other disaster. More recently, for 5 years until COVID shut it down, at least temporarily, we were holding an annual air pollution prevention art contest in the schools. And that was a way for donors to provide literally hundreds of dollars in gift credit card prizes to the kids and their families. The first prize winners got a $100 credit card gift certificate. You can go cash it anywhere. And that helped kids, and it was an award, but it was also something that could actually help the children. And I've got a quick picture to share with that, and I've lost you guys, so I've come back to share. Sorry, to the little green arrow, and you'll recognize at least one of the people in the picture, our supervisors in the middle there. And look at those cute kids. They're so excited. And they all drew a picture that related to air pollution, related to smoke from fireplaces and wood burning stoves. And the fact that the downtown areas, especially in Felton, had gone way above the EPA's levels of pollution for particulates. So Jan Parks gets the credit for this idea, and she was trying to find a way to help reduce that air pollution, and she thought this would be a fun thing. So it's amazing what one person can do, and this went on for 5 years before COVID, and because of it, there were thousands of dollars donated so the kids could get really good rewards. And it was a donation credit, that you could take off on your taxes. So that was really fun. And the Monterey Bay Air Resources District, the gentleman on the left is named David Nelson, and he's with the district, and he's wonderful. And he would come every year and be there and congratulate the kids. And who was the happiest was the parents, because not only were their kids being honored for doing something that they may or may not have had skill in. They weren't necessarily super artistic drawings, but they were very effective in one way or another. But they were very grateful that their kids were honored, and that there was $25 or $50 that the kid could spend on something they really wanted, or that the parents could spend on their shoes or whatever. So that was a fun one, and I have to, because you're here, Caroline, had to bring up the fact that we shared the honor of helping with the recycling art contest, recycled art contest with the senior center, and what a joy that was, and I can't wait for that to come back. And I couldn't believe the quality of the art that came out of that. That was very special. Way back in 2001, because of the efforts of a couple of people on the environmental committee, the Valley Women's Club got a $45,000 grant for something we call the Watershed Festival of Events. And the events have still been ongoing. It's not such a festival anymore because we aren't focused on it in the same way, but it resulted in a whole series of things that people could do to learn about their impact due to global warming and how to reduce their impact on the watershed. And we designed and reproduced and mailed thousands of copies of a series of informational brochures. And we took hundreds of people out on walks through the watershed with very talented and skilled people. There was an event tied to each brochure as it was released. So people, if the brochure was on erosion control, there was a presentation on erosion control. this one came a little bit more recently, so we didn't have an event for it. But I'm sorry if you can't see the whole thing, but it's the top 20 benefits of trees, which we very thoughtfully distributed to all the PG&E people that we could think of so that they might reconsider their enhanced vegetation management. So this kind of brings us along to a couple of things. One is the environmental town hall, which got postponed for the second time this year because of COVID, but I think we're going to go ahead and hold it in February. Mark Stone's going to be available then. And that's an opportunity for people to come together at the Felton Community Hall or on Zoom. You know, if we have to do it that way, we will. And hear from our state representative what's going on in the state level regarding the environment. And we need to get Mark here to talk about what they're doing about wildfires, what they're doing about fire prevention, what they're doing about global warming, because the fires are contributing to climate change, and even worse, allowing PG&E to cut down as many trees as they're cutting down, which is a million trees a year, by the way, is definitely having an impact on climate change. It's not helping. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do that with Mark Stone this year. And if we have to do it on Zoom, I don't know if you've been to it or not, but there are usually 25 or so other organizations there, and they provide information to the people who come. It could be from the Parks Department, you know, where you can visit and what you can do and what activities are going on at the parks. I'm sure we will have somebody there from Big Basin to talk about when and where and if and how Big Basin will reopen. I understand that they are planning on reopening it to hikers on just a couple of trails by reservation only within the next year. So that's at least a step in the right direction. So I wanted to talk about why I think PG&E is so crucial related to climate change, and how our involvement came about and why we're so deeply involved. It won't take long because it's a pretty simple concept. We all know the horrors of wildfire, and you are all, I'm sure, attuned more than anybody in our community about the impacts on people and homes and trees and waterways. And many of you may be currently dealing with all that and more. I'm so sorry to hear that if that's the case. One fact that is really important for people to understand is that utility-associated wildfires are worse than other wildfires, than wildfires from other causes, because they always happen during a high wind event. So the fire is immediately more dangerous because it is being spread more quickly. And those high wind events have names like the Santana winds, the Diablo winds, Santa Lucia winds, the Sundowner winds. And so when you think about PG&E's first response, which was to create back in 2016, they had all these wildfires. So in 2017, they came up with, we'll do a wildfire safety plan, So they decided they would do two things. One was they decided they would cut down more trees and clear more power lines, and they would call it enhanced vegetation management. And they decided that they would turn off the power during high wind events. And actually, the only thing that's working is the PSPS, the public safety power shutoffs. But the wildfire safety plan was approved by the CPUC as because that's what PG&E wanted to do. And it was basically ignoring the fact that their infrastructure is so antiquated and unsafe, with only piecemeal repairs and occasional pole replacements. Because of that, PSPS is the only way to protect us from wildfires. Due to PG&E's incompetence, with little notice to anyone and the suddenness of the outage in areas where outages are rare, because the outages happen in cities and towns, because they couldn't separate the areas where they thought there might be a problem from the rest of the everything was linked up in too big of pieces, and it took them days to get rid of, to restore power. Due to this fiasco, PG&E was rightfully criticized. All the problems caused by that first year of PSPS and more. So PG&E has spent millions of our ratepayer dollars to get all sorts of high-tech weather equipment and to provide adequate notification and to provide places to go to charge your oxygen equipment or your cell phone or whatever. And I wanted to show you an example of the inadequate equipment. And this is where we can start having an impact locally as individuals. You are looking at a bare 6-gauge copper wire. There are 22,000 miles of it in PG&E land in its service area. Of that, over 7,000 miles is located in forested areas. So in high fire threat forested areas. So we have hundreds of miles of this in Santa Cruz County. And it is not safe. This is a picture taken by Kevin Collins in front of his house in Lompico. And that power line was knocked down by a branch. It was so flimsy that it just snapped and broke. It had no reinforcement. It had no insulation. It's probably close to 60 years old because the poles were put up about 60 years ago, 50 to 60 years ago. And you can, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can identify this. So that power, that fire, thank goodness it was during the rains. This was long enough ago that we had more rain going on. And more recently, one came down though in the summer, and it was far more frightening because he was out there with his fire extinguisher trying to put out an electric fire, basically. He called the fire department and they came, and they were able to control the fire until PG&E came 3 hours later. So this type of thing is going to happen more and more, and this is what's causing the problems. It's not just bare copper wire though, it's also the bare aluminum wire. You'll see that all over the place, and it's a little bit better than the copper wire because it's heavier. Along the coast, however, it deteriorates severely in salt air. And so it can start its own sparking and arcing just from the salt in the air corroding it. So the aluminum, this was all presented back in 2013. Real quickly, the CPUC has things called proceedings, and that's how they get things done. They can take months, it can take years. Well, after PG&E burned up and blew up because of the gas pipeline in San Bruno, they were going through something called a safety culture proceeding, because they were making sure that PG&E modified its thinking and started worrying about safety more. And so they hired this company for tens of thousands of dollars. And this company called Liberty Consulting studied PG&E and found out what they were doing wrong. One of the things was this 22,000 miles of bare copper wire and another several tens of thousands of miles of the aluminum wire along the coast. And they recommended that they be replaced as soon as possible. And then in 2016, the part of the CPUC called the Office of Safety Advocate reminded PG&E and reminded the CPUC that they hadn't done this yet. And those wires were still out there. and that they really needed to do something about it. And of course, they were ignored because instead of that, their safety plan was to cut down trees and turn off the power. So the massive expansion of vegetation management is what got us involved. They came in June of 2018 to our board of supervisors and announced their plan, those two things. They presented a very benign looking picture of what the vegetation management was going to look like. And this is the diagram that they presented to the Board of Supervisors. It's part of a brochure that the Board of Supervisors got and that we got a hold of because Kevin Collins was at the meeting. And it looks pretty reasonable, doesn't it? It shows the power poles and it shows that they're just going to cut back 15 feet on both lines, both sides. Well, that's a good 10 feet more than their right of way, number one. And number two, we're talking about the forest. We're talking about shrubs and bushes and trees of all kinds that have grown up and along and around the power line. And if you denude that completely, 30 feet wide, you have this huge space that is going to get drier faster. It's going to expose the soil to drying. It's going to grow invasive non-natives without any problem whatsoever. And those things like broom will grow much faster. And so that whole area is going to be a fire hazard, even more than it is now. And the other thing is we learned from the fire in Paradise that, excuse me, the fire started, it went through an area that had previously been wildfire, had a fire, and it came to the area that hadn't, and it began to speed up. The wind was blowing like heck. And they had cleared around the power lines. And so that created a wind tunnel. This allowed the firebrands, the pieces of burning, flaming material to be blown way ahead of the fire itself and blown to the neighborhoods where the houses were, and the firebrands were blown slamming against the houses. And you see pictures of these neighborhoods where house after house after house after house after house is burned down. And around it are a few barely charred trees with no fire at all in some of them, because the tree tunnel had created this wind, the clearing around the power lines had created a tree tunnel and a wind tunnel. So the other thing that happens is when you cut down those trees, the ones next to them become weakened and they end up falling, and that's called wind throw. So, and guess what takes out the weak, lousy power line better than a branch? It's the whole tree falling on it. So that was PG&E's plan though, and so that's what they've been doing. And they have spent billions of dollars removing trees. And the Dixie fire started because a tree fell on their crap wire and it caught fire. It took a long time, but that's what happened. The Dixie fire is the biggest fire in the history of California and maybe the whole United States. It's horrible. So PG&E is making a lot of mistakes, and they decided not to replace that 22,000 miles of antiquated 6-gauge wire. The CPUC did not force them to. But the reason was the way they were doing it, the way they were running things is called run to failure. That's their business model. That meant that you keep the same old equipment running until it fails, and then you repair it. You don't replace it. You don't upgrade it. And multiple repairs continue to further weaken those lines, and it doesn't get better, it gets worse. The CPUC regulations themselves, they're called general orders. Well, General Order 95 is the one that governs what utilities do, electric utilities. They do not require replacement when repairs are being made to unsafe, outmoded, long worn out equipment. They allow them to just repair the one thing that broke. That's what enabled Paradise to happen. That's what happened all the way throughout all of the things that have been utility associated wildfires. So had an environmental impact report been required when enhanced vegetation management was first proposed in 2017, PG&E and the CPUC would have had to confront the fact that it's the wires, not the trees, that are causing the problem. Well, guess what? CPUC self-declared them as PG&E exempt. They didn't have to do it because it wasn't a big enough project. Well, it was only 800 or more times more removal of trees and things than the existing plan. The problem is it's not just branches causing the problem, it's balloons. 400 outages are caused a year in PG&E land from balloons. And some of those outages result in fires. Other igniters, the things that set the fires, include vehicles, car crashes into a power line and knocks it down. Did you hear about the one up in Cincinnati? There were some wires hanging down that were old AT&T wires, and a car ran into the wires, and those wires went flipping around and flipped up and caught the car, knocked it off the road, hit the wires, PG&E bare wires above, and that caused them to spark and cause a wildfire. So all the people commuting, thank God it was commute time, all the people commuting on Cincinnati jumped out of their cars, ran over with their water bottles and their shovels and their blankets and tried to put out the fire. And of course, Cincinnati Fire Department got there within 5 minutes and were able to finish putting it out. But that wouldn't have happened if that had been a reinforced covered wire. So guess who solved the problem? Guess who's been doing it right? Guess who's succeeding in curtailing wildfires? Southern California Edison. That's the second biggest investor-owned utility in the state of California. In 2017, when PG&E was creating its miraculous plan, they realized by looking at it and by doing a risk-benefit assessment, they found out that it was the power lines that were the problem. And they decided to do something about it. So they tried to find out who had luck fixing this problem. Well, they studied Australia and Japan and Europe and Asia and Southeast Asia. And they found out that all of those places, whether it was urban or rural or forested or wilderness or marsh, it didn't matter what kind of problem they had to deal with. If they had steel reinforced covered conductor, then they didn't have fires. And they had a much more reliable system that lasted at least 40 years with less infrastructure repair, with fewer problems all the way along the line. So Southern California says, aha, we're going to do that. The first year they replaced over 500 miles of their line. Now this year and next year they're replacing 5,000 miles of their lines. You want to know how many PG&E's done? First year, they do harden a few lines every once in a while. So they did something in the neighborhood of 120 miles the first year. This year they got up to 170, but now they're going to start over and they're reconsidering everything. And so they're going back to their minimal replacements until they figure it out. They're starting over again and looking at where they should underground and where they should harden the wires instead of doing the job. So guess what? The only one wildfire that Southern California Edison had this year was where the wires were still bare. PG&E has restarted many fires this year, you guys. Dixie wasn't, Dixie wasn't the only one. So PG&E is being irresponsible. We're going to have PSPS forever. Every year they're going to make it a little bit better because they're spending money on that. Southern California Edison has discontinued PSPS except in the bare wire areas. Southern California Edison has stopped enhancing this. It completely stopped enhanced in vegetation management. They're back to their regular vegetation management, even though they haven't finished all the bare wires, because they're going to do it and they're going to do it in a hurry. They do have fewer miles to do, but that's not an excuse. That makes it even more embarrassing. PG&E should be doing more. And of course, they're focusing on their high utility wildfire risk areas. So we're dealing with a really irresponsible company, and we're dealing with a regulatory agency that is called a captured agency. That means that they're being controlled by the company they're supposed to be overseeing. And that is true, and it's been proven again and again. So I wanted to make the point that this has gotten worse since the wildfire here. You know that PG&E went in and literally clear cut, not just under the right of way, but hundreds of feet away from the right of way, clearing all trees that had any potential of falling and hitting their wires. They supposedly were only cutting hazard trees. They cut every tree. And people who had been up there and saw the damage and brought in their own arborists to inspect the trees, or their own registered professional forester to check the trees, and were told, oh, this whole grove of oaks is fine, they're going to recover, they should be left alone, and they would come back and those were gone. PG&E would have cut them down. So PG&E really has a problem. And one of the things as a result of that is CAL FIRE actually hit PG&E and their contractors with 6 notices of violation, each one of which is multiple pages with all sorts of photographs, saying that they broke the law by doing illegal cutting without a permit. And those notices of violation are now in the hands of the higher level people at CAL FIRE. We hope that very soon it will be turned over to the Attorney General for criminal action. But we don't know if that's going to happen. In the meantime, we suggested to our supervisors that they file a formal safety complaint against PG&E because of all of these notices of violation and because of the danger that they provide to the county and to the people of the county. Because all the tree removals have exacerbated the potential for erosion. They drove their huge heavy vehicles right across waterways that should not have been touched. They broke so many rules that they really have endangered people. They've made the problem of erosion and debris flow worse. And they even left the watershed of the SLE water district in bad shape. So they sort of restored the roadways, but they didn't change anything else that they had damaged. So PG&E, just for the convenience of getting all the trees out of the way, have really prevented the proper restoration of the forests in our area, and have these complaints against them, which I hope will result in more criminal action. And our brave little county is the PG&E, of course, immediately said, oh, this safety thing that they filed, the safety complaint that they filed is all unrelated to what we do, and blah 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 blah, and we're so good, and CPC did not deny the complaint. The PG&E is going to have to face the judges on this one, and they have what they call administrative judges to deal with these things, and there's a process that goes through. It takes a long time. So I'm really impressed by the wisdom and the ability of the county council lawyers that worked on this. There are two of them, and they did a brilliant job. So we are very hopeful about that process, that at least something might come of it. At bare minimum, the PG&E will come back and clean up the mess they made, and make people whole as best as they can, at least by restoring their land. So the biggest problem is that we've got all these bare wires around us, and that PG&E is not planning on replacing them. They are coming in and they're replacing some power poles, and those power poles were put up in the 60s. So probably a good idea to replace those. Ours is due to be replaced. We got told that, the one that's right outside our house right there, with about 200 feet of bare wire right across the meadow, down to the road, down to Bear Creek Road. So we've read, analyzed, and provided comments on each PG&E wildfire mitigation plan since 2017, when their first one was made. And then the state required the mitigation plans. We've researched hundreds of issues and read hundreds of documents. We've written a white paper. One of our members filed a formal complaint and was told by the judge that the wildfire mitigation plans would solve his problems. It hasn't. We are engaged with the Board of Forestry because we don't want them to diminish the strength of their permits, and PG&E is pushing for that. We are engaged with our state legislators to encourage legislation to require comprehensive infrastructure modernization to happen within a specified time. And we feel if Southern California Edison can replace 5,000 miles of its distribution line system within 2 years, then PG&E can certainly do that as well. And thinking about what you can do, I think you all know about climate change and what you can do in your personal life, and I'm sure you're all basically doing the best you can in that regard. Driving as little as you can, literally not driving a day a week is a good thing to do. If you can avoid it, if you're working full time, that's real hard to avoid, but give it a try. And consider the impact on the problem, and try to make lifestyle changes. Be sure you involve the whole family or anybody else that you're working with or around, to make sure it's a decision that you all can live with. And regarding PG&E, if you want to be involved directly, please go outside your house and look up. See if you can determine whether the power lines in your neighborhood are bare wire. They probably are, unless you live on one of the main roads like Bear Creek Road and Highway 9. Most is not covered conductor. Most of it is not insulated. We know none of it is insulated and steel reinforced. Southern California Edison's is steel reinforced and covered. So we think that's a good idea. So you can let
Would it be possible to show that first picture that you showed of the bare wire? Yeah, I think it would help everybody look up and be able to tell.
Sure.
I wasn't thinking like that when you showed it.
Right. I can share that again. Thank you for your suggestion, Gwen. That's a good idea. It's 6 gauge, which is not as big as you think wire should be, but copper wire. Oh, they're seeing my whiteboard. Why aren't they seeing my picture? Wait, let me stop the share so I can get the right picture. Sorry. Try one more time to get this picture. It's up there. I did burning. Now share. There. Is that it? Okay, you can see it now. So you can see the twig. So you know that's one of the smaller twigs, right? And so that's all the bigger that wire is. It's you know your baby finger at most. If you're a woman, if you're a man, it's probably not your baby finger because that's too big. But it's not very big. It doesn't look like copper. It'll look black, maybe even green, but mostly black. And you may notice slices in it, and that's a place where they've taken it and they've put it back together again, and there's so it's a little bit thicker there, where they overlap and join together. And then go look at your power poles. There's probably one pretty nearby. There are these little metal tags. I wish I thought to have a picture of these. I have one in my phone, but I haven't gotten it to my computer yet. There are these metal tags, and they have, if you look at them real carefully, they have dates on them and other information on them. You might be able to see the words inspected and then a date on one or another of those little tags. You can tell if the pole looks old because the wood will look deteriorated. It may have been made into a place for parrot, what do you call them? One of the birds that peck holes in things. Woodpeckers. It may be a woodpecker tree, woodpecker pole. We had a woodpecker pole right down the street from us for a long, long time. They finally replaced it last year. So let me know what you see. And if you're not sure and you want me to come, I will come and look. We're trying to gather together information about which neighborhoods are for sure in danger from bare wire, especially the bare copper wire. If it's bare aluminum wire, it'll be a little bit bigger. You know, it'll be closer to your thumb than your baby finger. One ironic thing is PG&E has an internal document that says what they're going to do in case of wildfire and how they're going to replace the system. And they say they're going to have covered conductor when they replace the system. Well, guess what happened up in Bonnie Doon? They brought in all these brand new power poles. Yay, they had to, they were burned down. They completely cleared the entire area of any trees at all. And you know, where they were going to put up power poles and where the power lines had been. And they put up the aluminum wire. So it's bare wire, but it's better than copper. In some areas, it was actually covered conductor. But if you drive up, what's that road called? Oh, not Empire Grade, but the other one that goes up from Highway 9 just above Ben Lomond, and it goes up to Empire Grade.
Alba.
Thank you. 2 points you get. Alba Road. If you go up to Alba Road and you get to the top, if you look to the right, it's all covered conductor. If you look to the left, there's this little stretch where it's the bare copper wire that they must have run out or something, and they had to put that back up. But as far as I know, it's still there. I should go look before I tell you to take the trip up Alba Road in the rain. Nobody wants to do that anyway. But anyway, so I would appreciate knowing anything you can tell me. And what I did was I called a PG&E representative, and I've got her name. Her name is Liz, L-I-Z-Z. And you can say Nancy Macy suggested I call because I'm a little bit concerned about how old my power pole is. And I wonder if you could tell me how old it is. And do you know if I have covered conductor out there, it looks like bare wire to me. And I would like to know, you know, so I can be aware of that. And she will probably say, okay, I'll find out. And she did find out for me. And that's how come I know my pole was built in the early 1960s. Because most of the poles that you look at, the little tags just talk about when they were last inspected. Oh, I see hands up. All right, so Mikhail.
Yes, thank you. That picture that John got of the burning bare wire, you said that was 6 gauge?
6 gauge copper.
And approximately how many households does that supply with
All the way
electricity?
up Lompico. From the bottom of Lompico up to the top.
That doesn't look like nearly thick enough wire, but I believe you mentioned something to that effect.
Yeah,
So thank you for
I think there
clarifying.
is some covered conductor in part of the lower part of Lompico, but it's not just a small neighborhood. It's streets. It's city streets. You can see it in downtown Santa Cruz and in downtown San Francisco.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Liz?
Yes, my question is of a slightly different nature. You mentioned the PUC,
Yes.
and you mentioned their somewhat illicit relationship with PG&E.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I wanted to find out, are those people are appointed, not elected, correct?
The 3 commissioners are appointed by the governor.
Okay, and they're the ones that ultimately decide?
Yes, they are. Part of the problem is that they are dependent upon the staff to be given the information that they need to know. And they are also heavily lobbied by PG&E.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's similar to a legislator, and they're also heavily lobbied by the governor. And right now, we don't think the governor is in our court on this one. Do you all remember, this was made public by ABC 10 in Sacramento, TV station. And do you remember the scandal that the governor went out to dinner at the French Laundry?
Right.
Without his mask? He was being wined and dined by PG&E lobbyists that evening. So, you know, I sure couldn't vote for the recall, but I sure am not going to vote for him in the next election if somebody else.
Well, and that restaurant is not a cheap restaurant.
No.
It's a very highbrow, expensive place.
Yeah, it's got a
That's an understatement.
Yeah,
I don't think I can afford it.
yeah, I wouldn't want to.
When I win the lottery, maybe, which
Yes.
is never going to happen. Bill, I'm sorry, your turn. What's your question?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Nancy, did you want pictures of bare wires in the South Felton neighborhood?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, how do I get them to you? If you'd like, I can share them if you.
I will chat. Let me stop sharing. So I will chat. And I'm going to put in both my phone number. Oh, where to go? Are you there? Oh, look. Thank you. Landline 831-3451. Cell. My cell doesn't work very well. I'm right on Bear Creek Road, but I have to sit at the dining room table for my cell to work.
Okay.
But I get text just fine. So
Do you have email?
And I do have email. I was just going to put that in there. And
Okay, I'm sharing the screen right now with the picture of the wire that was replaced in January.
Oh.
Very shiny, but if people want to come look at it, it's at the corner of Jackson Way and Prospect up San Lorenzo Avenue, San Lorenzo Way. And today they replaced another length of wire along San Lorenzo. And I'm willing to bet that they also replaced it with bare wire. So that's Bigfoot Hill, San Lorenzo Way.
Take a hunk out and put it on the plate for me. Yeah, Saladin's good. My son's taking care of you guys. Because dinner was there, but I didn't eat it. This is much
Okay.
more fun. So, yeah, no, that's really interesting. So that cable is what they put up to replace old wire?
That's correct.
Oh, Christ, excuse me.
It wasn't a large amount of wire. It was a
No.
couple, 3 blocks.
Well, see, that's what PG&E is doing right now. They're doing piecemeal upgrades, but they're not required to use reinforced. It should be SECO reinforced triple insulated wire like Southern California Edison is using. It's absolutely fascinating. Thank you for that picture. And please
welcome.
do send it to me via email. Pretty please. That would be very helpful. Thank you, Bill. That was very kind of you to come up with that. And so you've had about 3 blocks of wire replaced. Did they change your power poles or anything?
I believe they've, today they were replacing power poles, but they didn't do it for the repair in January.
I see. So that was last January.
There were 2 power outages, 2 days each.
Right.
And today they replaced power poles, but not last week.
Okay. All
I
right.
mean, last January.
But not the last visit in January. That's absolutely fascinating. And can you tell me where you are in Felton?
Yeah, we call it Bigfoot Jackson. It's off of Jackson Way, which is up San Lorenzo Avenue.
Right.
You know the Quarry Road, Felton Quarry Road?
I do. Yeah, you're pretty far up there.
Actually, it's only about half a mile, less than
Is
that.
it only half a mile? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, is it on, you go up and it's on the left, right? That's the only direction I can turn as I'm going up the hill, right?
if you're going up the hill, it's to the left,
Yeah,
correct.
okay. Okay, you're wonderful. Any other questions? Another way to be involved is if you want to be on the list of people that I email when something is happening, like occasionally we need everybody to make a phone call to the CPUC, or we need everybody to send a quick email to your legislators about such and such a piece of legislation or something like that. It's not going to happen all the time. It would be from my email address, and it would, in the subject line, it would be very clear what it's about. I always make my subject lines, tell what it's about, so you know whether or not you want to bother opening it. So it'll say something like, please call Stone RE legislation or something like that. And it'll be from nbbm@cruzio.com. So that's another way. And you can let me know either by text or call or email if you want to be one of those on that list. You can talk to your neighbors and let them know. You can write your legislators, and the basic message is PG&E needs to be required by the CPUC to create a comprehensive modernization plan of its high fire threat danger distribution lines. And they need to use steel core triple insulated wire like Southern California Edison. And they need to start doing thousands of miles a year. So I'd be happy to type that message up, and you can send it to Mark Stone and John Laird. John Laird, they both know about it. They both spoke about it at the annual Valley Women's Club annual meeting in September. But we need specific legislation because the CPUC isn't doing it. It'll take them years to do it. And so if it comes out as a piece of legislation, they have to do it. That's the only control we have over utilities, you guys. The CPUC is part of the California state constitution, which makes it far too powerful and far too easily to be manipulated, apparently, over the years. There's one other thing that we can try to do, and you could let Bruce McPherson know you would support the effort, and that is we want to get the county to renegotiate its contract with PG&E. What's that contract called? Boy, brain freeze. My friend Linda Moore, who some of you may know, calls that a magical moment of maturity. What's it called? Well, I'll try to remember. It may come up at 2 o'clock this morning. Anyway, if you let Bruce know that you would like the county to try to renegotiate the PG&E contract, just call it that, then and that you would support him in doing that, because it's really hard to get the supervisors to do something like that, because they think they're going to get slapped in the face, and that's one of the things we've been pushing for a long time. Guess when that contract was written? In the 1950s. Guess how much has been changed since then? None. We do get money from PG&E when they, the rent that they get from having the cable line on or something. The county, I think, gets something like 2% of its income from the wires or from the poles. I think it's like something like $200,000 a year. It's not a bad amount. I bet you nickel it could be more. There were renegotiated. The best example we have is San Diego Gas and Electric, which is another IOU, which is an investor-owned utility, i.e. for profit, as opposed to LA Light and Power, which is run by the city. San Diego somehow had a 30-year contract with San Diego Gas and Electric. So they were just franchise agreement. I didn't have to wait till 2 a.m. The franchise agreement. So if we could get a new franchise agreement, and San Diego Gas and Electric got one because it ran out after 30 years, but they have been able, part of the requirement they had with San Diego Gas and Electric is with every new bit of construction, which of course was a whole lot in the past 30 years in San Diego, power lines had to be underground. So 70% of San Diego Gas and Electric's power lines are underground. That's not always the panacea it may seem to be, but for new construction, it really is a good idea. It would be very difficult to underground extensive lengths of line around here, and it's there right now. PG&E is going to charge the county $2 million a mile for the 6 miles that they have planned. So we may not want to try to pay that as ratepayers. And the steel reinforced covered conductor is just as good. So I hope that this has been of interest, and I didn't mean to talk so long. It's already almost 9 o'clock, which is you all get to turn into pumpkins. Right, Tammy? Go home.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Oh,
Alice,
Allie has her hand up.
I just had one question. Are you working at all with the people who are trying to spearhead a movement to deprivatize PG&E?
Oh yeah, we would love that to happen. And again, that's up to the legislature. They could do that, but the CPUC has a process where they can get there, and PG&E is on the first level of that 5-step process. But don't see that happening in the near future, in spite of the Dixie Fire, in spite of the horrible disasters that they have done, and in spite of the fact that they want to cut down a couple million more trees this year. So we don't need those trees lost. We need them. All right. So don't be down about it, because we've made progress, and they are including hardening in their models these days, which is a good thing. So be safe, everybody. Stay well, stay healthy, get your shots. Good advice. That was fun to learn about. I appreciate that, Jo Marie.
Thank you again, Nancy, for being our guest this evening.
Yeah, well,
and,
give me a
giving us
chance to
such
talk. I have
great
a good time.
knowledge.
Thanks for your
about-
questions. They
such
were
deep
all
knowledge
great.
about this. Yeah.
Really appreciated your questions. All right.